The massive alien ship appeared in Earth's sky like a dark moon that had lost its way. It was bigger than any city on the planet below, its hull made of something that looked like black crystal but was harder than diamond. The ship's surface was smooth except for strange symbols that glowed with a cold blue light. When people on Earth looked up and saw it hanging there, blocking out the sun, many of them fell to their knees and prayed. The ship had not come alone. Behind it, at the very edge of space where human telescopes could barely see, waited thousands more just like it. They formed a line across the stars that stretched further than anyone could count. Each ship carried enough weapons to turn a planet into dust. Each ship held soldiers from a race that had conquered more worlds than there were grains of. Sand on Earth's beaches, the aliens called themselves the Zephyrian Empire. They had ruled the galaxy for longer than humans had existed. Their empire stretched across 400 star systems. They had destroyed civilizations that were older and more advanced than humanity. They had turned entire species into slaves. They had burned worlds that refused to surrender. They had never lost a war. Ambassador Veltar stepped from his shuttle onto the landing platform outside the United Earth Council building in Geneva. He was 3 meters tall and made of living crystal that changed colors as he moved. His body had no flesh, no blood, no weakness that humans could understand. When he walked, the ground shook slightly under his weight. When he spoke, his voice sounded like breaking glass mixed with thunder. Behind him came 6 guards. Each guard was 2.5 meters tall and covered in armor that seemed to eat light. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Their faces were hidden behind masks that showed no emotion, no mercy, no doubt. They had killed millions of beings across the galaxy. To them, humans were just another species waiting to die. The human delegates were already waiting in the council chamber. President Sarah Chun sat at the head of the long table. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Next to her sat Admiral Marcus Torres, the head of Earth's military forces. He was a big man with scars on his hands from old battles. Around the table sat representatives from every nation on Earth. They all looked nervous, but they tried not to show it. Veltar entered the chamber without ceremony. He did not bow. He did not greet them. He simply stood at the far end of the table and looked down at the humans as if they were insects. His crystal body flashed red for a moment and settled into a cold blue glow. "I am Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire," he said. His voice filled the room even though he spoke quietly. "I speak with the authority of Emperor Zoran himself. I bring you a message that will determine the fate of your species." President Chun stood up slowly. She was not afraid, but she knew that the wrong words could mean death for everyone on Earth. "We welcome you, Ambassador. We are ready to hear your message." Veltar's body flashed red again. Among his people, red meant anger or contempt. "There is nothing to discuss. There are no negotiations. There is only the choice between submission and extinction." He raised one of his 4 arms and pointed at a holographic display that appeared in the air above the table. The display showed Earth as seen from space, beautiful and blue and peaceful. Then it showed other planets, dead planets, burned planets, planets that had once been home to billions of beings but were now nothing but rocks floating in empty space. "These worlds refused our offer," Veltar said. "They believed they could resist the Empire. They were wrong. Every one of them is now silent. Every one of them is now empty. Every one of them serves as a reminder of what happens to those who defy us." The human delegates watched the images in silence. They saw cities that had been melted into glass. They saw oceans that had been boiled away. They saw the bones of civilizations that had lasted for thousands of years before the Empire found them. "Your species has 3 standard cycles to make." "Your choice," Veltar continued. A standard cycle was about 24 Earth hours. "You will surrender unconditionally. You will accept imperial rule without question. You will hand over 80% of your population to work in our mining operations on designated labor worlds. The remaining 20% will stay on Earth to extract resources for the Empire. Admiral Torres felt his hands clench into fists under the table. He had spent his entire life preparing to defend Earth from threats, but this threat was bigger than anything humanity had ever faced. The aliens had technology that was centuries ahead of human science. They had weapons that could crack planets. They had shields that had never been broken. They had an army that numbered in the billions. You will also provide us with complete access to all human technology, Veltar went on. We are particularly interested in your computer systems and your biological research. These will be useful additions to our archives. President Chun remained standing. Her voice was steady when she spoke. And if we refuse your offer? Veltar's body flashed bright red. Then you will join the dead worlds in our display. Your planet will burn, your species will be extinct within one solar day. Your names will be forgotten, your history will end. The ambassador gestured again and the holographic display changed. Now it showed the alien fleet waiting at the edge of the solar system. Ship after ship after ship, each one the size of a mountain, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a continent. The humans could see energy readings that made their most powerful weapons look like toys. This is the 7th Imperial Fleet, Veltar said. It has conquered 43 star systems. It has destroyed 18 civilizations that refuse to. Surrender, it has never been defeated. It waits for my signal to begin the bombardment of your world. The alien guards behind Veltar shifted slightly. It was a small movement, but Admiral Torres noticed it. These soldiers were ready for violence. They expected the humans to attack them in desperation. They had probably seen it happen before on other worlds. Species that knew they were about to die often tried to take their conquerors with them, but the humans did not attack. They sat in their chairs and listened. They showed no panic, no desperation, no wild anger. They were calm in a way that seemed strange to the aliens. Most species either begged for mercy at this point or tried to fight. The humans did neither. We understand your position, President Chun said finally. This is indeed a significant decision for our species. We will need the full 3 cycles to consider all aspects of your offer. Veltar's body flickered between red and blue. He had expected tears or rage or immediate surrender. Instead, the humans were asking for time to think. It was unusual, but not unheard of. Some species went into shock when faced with the reality of imperial power. You have 3 cycles, he repeated. When that time ends, you will give me your answer. Choose wisely. The Empire has shown mercy by offering you this chance. Do not waste it. The ambassador turned and walked toward the door. His guards followed him without a word. As they left, the air in the room seemed to become lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. But everyone knew the weight was still there. It was just waiting outside. When the aliens were gone, the human delegates sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Admiral Torres spoke. Well, that could have gone worse, President Chun almost smiled. How exactly could it have gone worse, Admiral? They could have. Started shooting immediately, Torres replied. At least we have 3 days. 3 days to do what? Asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of the Global Science Council. Pray for a miracle? Build weapons that can fight their fleet? Evacuate 8 billion people to another star system? 3 days to activate Phoenix Protocol, Torres said quietly. The room fell silent again. Phoenix Protocol was the most classified military program in human history. Most of the people in the room had heard rumors about it, but only a few knew what it really involved. Dr. Vasquez was one of them. President Chin was another. Are we really ready for that? Chun asked. Torres nodded. We've been ready for 15 years. Every system is in place. Every installation is operational. Every person knows their role. He paused and looked around the table. The question is whether we're ready for what comes after. President Chun stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see people in the streets looking up at the alien ship. Some were crying, some were running. Some were standing perfectly still, as if they could not believe what they were seeing. How long have we known this day would come? She asked. Since first contact 30 years ago, Torres replied. Since the moment we realized we weren't alone in the universe and that our new neighbors weren't friendly. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. The Prometheus project has been running for 28 years. Every major government has contributed. Every scientific breakthrough has been shared. Every resource has been pooled. She paused. If Phoenix Protocol works, it will change everything. Not just for us, but for the entire galaxy. And if it doesn't work? Ask the representative from the African Union. Then we all die, Torres said simply. But at least we'll die fighting, President Ching turned back to the group. I want a full briefing on Phoenix Protocol in 2 hours. I want status reports from every major installation. I want confirmation that all systems are ready. She looked directly at Torres. And I want to know exactly what we're going to tell Ambassador Valtar when he comes back in 3 days. Torres smiled for the first time since the aliens had arrived. We're going to tell him no. As the delegates left the chamber, they all knew that the next 3 days would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the fate of every species in the galaxy that had ever dreamed of freedom. The Zephyrian Empire thought they were dealing with just another primitive planet. They had no idea they were about to face something the galaxy had never seen before. Outside, the alien ship continued to block the sun, but in the shadows it cast, humanity began to prepare for war. Not the kind of war the Empire expected, with desperate last stands and heroic sacrifices. This would be a different kind of war entirely. This would be a war the Empire could never win, because they didn't. Even though it had already begun, the Zephyrian fleet hung in space at the edge of the solar system like a wall of death. 10,000 ships arranged in perfect formation, each one bristling with weapons that could turn mountains into vapor. Admiral Kethmel stood on the bridge of the flagship and watched the distant blue dot that was Earth through the view screen. The humans appear to be in chaos, reported his intelligence officer, a thin crystalline being whose body glowed pale yellow. Our senses detect massive population movements, emergency government sessions, and what appears to be panic in their major cities. Kethmel nodded with satisfaction. This was how it always went. First came denial, then panic, then desperate attempts to organize some kind of resistance. Finally, when the condemned species realized how hopeless their situation was, came surrender. The pattern had repeated itself across hundreds of worlds. Any sign of military preparation? He asked. Minimal, the officer replied. They are moving their orbital defense platforms into position around their homeworld. Primitive kinetic weapons and chemical explosives mostly. Nothing that could threaten even our smallest escort ships. The Admiral allowed himself a moment of amusement. The humans had built a few weapons platforms in orbit around their planet. They probably thought these toys would make the Empire reconsider. They had no idea that the Imperial fleet could destroy every human installation in the solar system without slowing down. Continue monitoring, Kethmel ordered. Alert me if they attempt to contact any other species or if their military activity increases significantly. What the Admiral could not see was what was really happening throughout the solar system. The Zephyrian sensors were advanced, but they were designed to detect known forms of technology. They looked for energy signatures they recognized, weapon systems they understood, ships built according to familiar patterns. They did not look for asteroids that moved when no asteroid should move, or for ice on distant moons that was somehow generating power, or for the strange gravitational anomalies that had been appearing throughout the outer planets. On Earth, the apparent chaos was carefully planned. The crowds of people fleeing the cities were not running in panic. They were moving according to schedules that had been planned for decades. Every person had a destination. Every movement had a purpose. The emergency government sessions were not desperate attempts to find solutions. They were final coordination meetings for a plan that had been in development. Since humans first learned they were not alone in the universe. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the control center buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of Ceres, the largest asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked at stations that monitored systems throughout the solar system. Holographic displays showed the status of installations on every major body from Mercury to Neptune. "Report," she said to her chief engineer, a young man named David Kim who had spent his entire career working on projects that officially did not exist. "All primary installations are online and ready," Kim replied. "Mars defense grid shows green across all systems. Jupiter array is at full power. Saturn ring network has completed final alignment. The belt installations are synchronized and awaiting orders." Vasquez nodded and moved to the next station. "What about the outer system?" "Uranus processing station reports ready status," said another technician. "Neptune installation confirms all systems operational. Pluto outpost is standing by." The woman paused and smiled slightly. "Even the Kuiper belt drones are in position." "Good," Vasquez said. "Said special projects?" Kim's expression became more serious. "Project Hammer is ready on schedule." "Project Shield shows full deployment." "Project Ghost reports all units cloaked and positioned." He hesitated for a moment. "Project Thunder is ... impressive. Even knowing what we built, it's hard to believe it actually works." Dr. Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. Project Thunder had been her personal contribution to humanity's defense. It had taken 12 years to build and had required more energy than the entire planet Earth used in a year. But if it worked, the way the simulations predicted, it would give the Zephyrian Empire a surprise they would never forget. "What about civilian evacuations?" she asked. "On schedule," Kim replied. "The transport ships are moving people to the deep installations. As planned. In 48 hours, every human civilian will be in a hardened shelter at least 1 kilometer underground or in a fully shielded space habitat." This was another thing the Empire's sensors could not properly interpret. What looked like panicked. Evacuation was actually the largest coordinated movement of people in human history. Families were not fleeing randomly from the cities. They were going to specific locations where they would be safe from anything the Empire could throw at them. Children were not being separated from their parents in chaos. They were being moved to underground schools that had been prepared for this day since before they were born. On the surface of Mars, construction crews worked around the clock to complete the final installations. The red planet's surface was covered with what looked like mining equipment and industrial facilities. The Empire's scouts had cataloged these installations years ago during the initial contact period. They appeared to be exactly what humans claimed they were: attempts to make Mars suitable for human habitation. What the scouts had not realized was that every piece of equipment on Mars served a dual purpose. The terraforming atmospheric processors could be converted to powerful particle beam weapons in less than 6 hours. The underground habitat domes were actually armored command centers. The massive solar panel arrays could focus energy into deadly concentrated beams. The planet's magnetic field generators, supposedly designed to protect human colonists from radiation, could create electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disable an entire fleet. Chief Engineer Sarah Martinez stood in the main control bunker. Beneath Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. The bunker had been carved out of solid rock and could survive a direct hit from the Empire's most powerful weapons. Around her, teams of specialists monitored the conversion process. As Mars transformed from a peaceful colony into a fortress. "How long until we're fully operational?" she asked her deputy. 18 hours, came the reply. "The Northern Hemisphere installations will be ready first. Southern Hemisphere needs another 6 hours after that." Martinez nodded and walked to the main display screen. It showed Mars as the Empire saw it, a primitive world with basic industrial facilities and a small human population. What it did not show was the truth. Mars was now the most heavily armed planet in the solar system. Every mountain peak concealed weapons that could reach across space. Every canyon held missile launchers. Every polar ice cap covered fusion reactors. That could power the defense systems for years, but Mars was not the only world that had been transformed. On Venus, beneath the crushing atmosphere and sulfuric acid clouds, human engineers had built installations that used the planet's hellish environment as a weapon. The atmospheric processors that were supposed to make Venus habitable could instead launch the planet's poisonous atmosphere at enemy ships. The floating research stations in the upper atmosphere were actually weapons platforms that could rain death from above while remaining invisible in the thick clouds. Jupiter presented its own opportunities. The gas giant's massive gravity well had been turned into a trap. Hidden throughout the planet's many moons were gravity generators that could create artificial gravitational fields strong enough to tear apart any ship that came too close. The Great Red Spot, a storm larger than Earth that had raged for centuries, now concealed the largest fusion reactor ever built by any species. When activated, it could power weapon systems throughout the entire solar system. Saturn's famous rings were perhaps humanity's greatest deception. What the Empire saw as beautiful ice and rock formations were actually millions of individual weapons platforms. Each piece of ice in the rings was a miniature missile with its own guidance system and nuclear warhead. Each rock was a kinetic projectile that could be launched at incredible speeds. The rings could deliver more firepower than the entire Imperial fleet, and they were completely invisible to enemy sensors because they looked exactly like what they were supposed to be. Even the outer planets had been weaponized. Uranus, tilted on its side and spinning differently from other planets, used its unusual rotation to power massive electromagnetic catapults. Neptune's extreme cold was used to create superconducting systems that could generate magnetic fields strong enough to deflect entire fleets. Pluto, no longer officially a planet but still useful, had been turned into a sensor station that could detect ships at the edge of the solar system. The asteroid belt was humanity's masterpiece. What looked like random chunks of rock floating in space were actually the largest coordinated weapons system ever built. Every asteroid larger than a house had been hollowed out and filled with weapons, sensors, or manufacturing equipment. The asteroids could move under their own power, change their orbits, and coordinate their attacks through a communication network that used quantum entanglement to prevent interception. Admiral Torres stood in the command center beneath Colorado's Cheyenne Mountain, watching displays that showed the true scope of humanity's preparations. For 30 years, every human government had contributed to this project. Every scientific breakthrough had been shared. Every resource that could be spared had been devoted to preparing for this day. "Status report," he ordered. "All systems are coming online ahead of schedule," reported his operations officer. "We'll be at full readiness 12 hours before the deadline," Torres nodded. "And the Empire's fleet? Still holding position at the edge of the system? No change in their formation or alert status. They appear to believe we're exactly what we seem to be." "Good," Torres said. "Let them keep believing that for another day." The Admiral walked to another console where a communications specialist was coordinating with installations throughout the solar system. "Any word from the deep space reconnaissance units?" "Affirmative, sir," the specialist replied. "Long-range sensors confirm the Empire has no additional fleets within 50 light-years. This is their only force in our region." "Excellent," Torres said. "And Project Exodus?" "The colony ships reached their destination 6 months ago. Even if we fail here, humanity will survive?" This was perhaps the most important part of the plan. While the Empire had been watching Earth, human ships had been quietly traveling to distant star systems. Not to flee, but to establish backup colonies in case the worst happened. If Earth fell, if the solar system was destroyed, humanity would continue. The species would survive to fight another day. But Admiral Torres did not believe they would fail. Humanity had spent 3 decades preparing for this moment. They had studied every piece of Imperial technology they could get their hands on. They had learned the Empire's tactics, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Most importantly, they had realized something that no other species in the galaxy had ever understood. The Empire was strong because they fought the same way every time. They relied on overwhelming force and superior technology to crush their enemies quickly. They had never faced an enemy that could match their technology. They had never fought a species that turned their entire star system into a weapon. They had never encountered anything like what humanity had built. As the second day since the ultimatum ended, the preparations continued. The Empire's sensors detected increased activity throughout the solar system, but they interpreted it as desperate attempts at evacuation and last-minute military preparations. They could not conceive of the scale of what they were actually seeing. In less than 24 hours, Ambassador Veltar would return to Earth for humanity's answer. The Empire expected either immediate surrender or a brief, hopeless battle followed by the complete destruction of the human species. They were going to get neither. They were going to get something that had never happened in the Empire's 1,000-year history. They were going to lose. The third day arrived with the same alien ship blocking Earth's sun. Ambassador Veltar stood once again in the council chamber, his crystal body glowing with confident blue light. Behind him, his guards waited with weapons ready. They expected either immediate surrender or a desperate attack from the doomed humans. President Chen sat in the same chair as before. Admiral Torres was beside her, looking calm despite knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of two civilizations. Around the table, the human delegates waited in silence. The time limit has expired, Veltar announced. What is your decision? President Chen stood slowly. Her voice was steady and clear when she spoke. We have carefully considered your offer, Ambassador. After much discussion, we have reached our decision. She paused for a moment, looking directly at the towering crystal being. We decline. Veltar's body flashed red with anger. In all his years as an imperial ambassador, no species had ever simply refused the Empire's ultimatum. There were usually tears, desperate negotiations, or immediate attacks. But these humans just said no as if they were declining an invitation to dinner. You refuse? Veltar's voice cracked like breaking stone. Do you not understand what this means? Do you not comprehend the power of the Imperial fleet? We understand. Perfectly, Admiral Torres said, speaking for the first time. You have 10,000 ships. Each ship carries enough weapons to destroy a city. Your technology is centuries ahead of what most species possess. Your empire has conquered 400 star systems without ever losing a war. Then why do you choose extinction? Veltar demanded. Torres smiled slightly. Because you made one very important mistake in your intelligence gathering. The Admiral reached for a control device on the table. Veltar's guards raised their weapons, thinking the human was reaching for a weapon. But Torres simply pressed a button that activated the room's communication system. This is Admiral Torres to all stations, he spoke into the device. Phoenix Protocol is now active. Reveal positions and power up all systems. Veltar looked confused. What is Phoenix Protocol? You're about to find out, Torres replied, high above Earth. Aboard the Imperial flagship, Admiral Kethmal was reviewing the final attack plans when every sensor on his ship began screaming warnings. Emergency alarms filled the bridge as displays lit up with impossible readings. Report! Kethmal shouted over the noise. Sir, massive energy signatures are appearing throughout the entire solar system, his sensor officer reported, his voice filled with shock. Every major planetary body is showing signs of technological activity. The readings they're off our scales. That's impossible, Kethmal said. Our scouts surveyed this system for years. There are only primitive installations around. Their homeworld. Sir, I'm detecting weapon signatures from Mars, multiple installations, all powering up simultaneously. The officer's voice was rising in panic. Jupiter shows massive energy output from its major moons. Saturn's rings are not ice and rock. They're artificial constructs. On the main view screen, the solar system was transforming before their eyes. What had looked like empty space around Mars suddenly blazed with energy, as hidden installations revealed themselves. The red planet's surface erupted with weapon emplacements that rose from underground bunkers. What had appeared to be simple mining operations were now clearly massive military installations. Sir, the asteroid belt is moving, another officer reported. The asteroids are changing orbit under their own power. They're not natural objects. They're ships or weapons platforms or... I don't know what they are, but there are millions of them. Kethmel felt something he had never experienced in his long military career. Fear. How many weapon signatures are you detecting? The sensor officer worked frantically at his controls. Sir, I can't get an accurate count. Every asteroid seems to be armed. Every moon around Jupiter and Saturn shows weapon signatures. Even the gas giants themselves are generating massive energy readings. That's impossible, Kethmel repeated, but his voice was weaker now. No species has ever weaponized an entire star system. Sir, incoming transmission from the human admiral, the communications officer reported. Put it through, Kethmel ordered. Admiral Torres' voice filled the Imperial bridge. Admiral Kethmel, I believe it's time we had a proper conversation. How do you know my name? Kethmel demanded. We've been watching your fleet since you entered our system, Torres replied. We know the name of every ship, every captain, every crew member. We've been listening to your communications, monitoring your movements, and studying your tactical formations. You see, Admiral, you made the same mistake your empire always makes. What mistake? Kethmel asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. You assumed we were like every other species you've conquered. You thought we would build a few defensive platforms around our homeworld and hope for the best. You never considered that we might be different. The view screen changed to show a tactical display of the solar system. But instead of the empty space and single inhabited world the Empire expected, the display revealed the truth. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid was part of a vast network of interconnected weapon systems. Energy lines showed the connections between installations, revealing a defensive grid that spanned the entire solar system. You see, Admiral, we've had 30 years to prepare for this day, Torres continued. 30 years since first contact with your empire. 30 years since we realized that our new neighbors were not friendly. 30 years to study your technology, learn your tactics, and prepare our response. Kethmel stared at the display in horror. This is impossible. No species has the resources to weaponize an entire star system. You're right, Torres agreed. No single species could do this, but we didn't do it as a single species. We did it. As a united world, every nation on Earth contributed. Every scientific breakthrough was shared. Every resource was pooled. We turned our entire civilization toward a single goal, making sure that when you came for us, you would regret it. On Mars, Chief Engineer Sarah Martinez watched her displays as the planet's hidden weapons came online. Massive railguns rose from concealed positions in the planet's valleys. Energy weapons emerged from beneath the polar ice caps. The terraforming equipment revealed its true purpose as it converted into particle beam cannons. All stations report ready, her deputy announced. Mars defense grid is fully operational. Good, Martinez replied. Target the Imperial flagship. Let's give them a demonstration they won't forget. She pressed the firing control, and Mars spoke with a voice of thunder. The railgun projectile crossed the space between Mars and the Imperial fleet in less than 3 seconds. It was a solid tungsten rod accelerated to 20% of light speed. When it hit the flagship's shields, the energy release was visible from Earth. As a brief new star in the sky, the Imperial flagship shuddered under the impact. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as the shields that had never been breached flickered and failed. The projectile had been stopped, but barely. Impossible, Kethmel whispered. Our shields have never been penetrated. Your shields were designed to stop the weapons your empire knows about, Torres' voice came through the speakers. We've had 30 years to develop new ones. The asteroid belt began to move. Millions of rocks that had floated peacefully in space for billions of years suddenly sprouted engines and started accelerating toward the Imperial fleet. But these were not desperate kamikaze attacks. Each asteroid moved with purpose, taking position in a formation that surrounded the entire enemy fleet. Sir, we're surrounded, the tactical officer reported. The asteroids have formed a sphere around our position. We're completely enclosed. How many hostiles? Kethmel demanded. Approximately 2.3 million individual targets, sir. Each one shows active weapon signatures. Admiral Torres' voice continued. Each of those asteroids contains weapon systems equivalent to one of your heavy cruisers. They're all networked together through a quantum communication system that makes them impossible to jam. They can coordinate their attacks with perfect precision. Jupiter's great red spot, the massive storm that had raged for centuries, began to change. The swirling clouds parted to reveal something that should not have existed, a fusion reactor the size of a continent. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the Imperial sensors could measure. That storm wasn't natural, Torres explained. We've been using Jupiter's gravity and magnetic field to contain a fusion reaction for the past 15 years. The energy output is approximately equivalent to your Empire's main battle station. Saturn's rings began to separate into individual components. What had looked like ice and rock was revealed to be millions of tiny spacecraft, each one armed with nuclear warheads. They moved in perfect formation, creating patterns of light that were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Each ring particle is a guided missile, Torres continued. There are approximately 40 million of them. They can track individual targets and coordinate their attacks to overwhelm any defensive system. The outer planets revealed their own surprises. Uranus began generating massive electromagnetic fields that distorted space itself. Neptune's extreme cold was used to power superconducting systems that could create artificial gravity wells. Even tiny Pluto revealed weapon emplacements that could reach across the solar system. You see, Admiral, Torres said, your empire has always won the same way. You bring overwhelming force to bear against isolated planets. You rely on superior technology and larger fleets to crush resistance quickly. But you've never faced a species that turned their entire star system into a coordinated weapon. Kethmal looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never known defeat. They had never even known doubt. But now, for the first time in their lives, they were afraid. What do you want? Kethmal asked. Right now, we want you to understand your situation, Torres replied. You came here expecting to find a primitive species with a few orbital defense platforms. Instead, you found something your empire has never encountered before. You're not facing a planet, Admiral. You're facing an entire weaponized star system. The tactical display updated again, showing energy readings from every installation in the solar system. The numbers were staggering. The combined firepower of humanity's hidden defenses exceeded the Imperial fleet by a factor of 10. Every planet is a fortress, Torres continued. Every moon is a weapons platform. Every asteroid is a guided missile. Every piece of space debris has been turned into a sensor or a weapon. We didn't just prepare to defend our world, Admiral. We prepared to destroy anyone who threatened it. Emperor Zoran himself, who had been monitoring the situation from his private chambers, emerged onto the bridge. His forearms moved in gestures of disbelief as he stared at the tactical displays. This is impossible, he said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. No species in the galaxy has technology this advanced. You're right, Your Imperial Majesty, Torres replied, somehow knowing that the Emperor was now present. No species in your empire has technology this advanced, but you see, we're not part of your empire. We never were, we're something new. The Emperor's crystal body flashed through colors that indicated confusion, anger, and for the first time in his long life, uncertainty. We know about your empire's history, Torres went on. We know how you conquered the galaxy. You found species that were isolated, divided, and unprepared. You used superior technology and overwhelming force to crush them before they could organize effective resistance. But we had 30 years to prepare, 30 years to unite our species, 30 years to study your methods and develop countermeasures. The solar system continued to reveal its secrets. Hidden installations emerged from every possible hiding place. Weapon systems that had been disguised as scientific equipment revealed their true purpose. The apparent chaos of human civilization was shown to be an elaborate deception covering the largest military buildup in galactic history. The war isn't starting now, Your Imperial Majesty, Torres said quietly. The war started 30 years ago, the moment your empire made contact. With humanity, you just didn't know it. And now, I'm afraid, it's too late for you to win it. Emperor Zoran stood on the bridge of his flagship, his crystal body cycling through colors that showed his rage. He had ruled the galaxy for 300 years. He had conquered civilizations that were older and more advanced than these primitive humans. He would not be intimidated by clever tricks and hidden weapons. Enough of this deception, the Emperor declared, his voice carrying across all Imperial communication channels. You may have more weapons than we expected, but you are still just one species on one world. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered 400 star systems. We will not be stopped by frightened animals hiding behind their toys. Admiral Torres' voice came through the speakers, calm and patient. Your Imperial Majesty, I strongly advise you to reconsider. What you're seeing is not a bluff or a deception. This is the reality of what humanity has built. You can still withdraw your fleet and avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Withdraw? Zoran's body flashed bright red. The Zephyrian Empire does not withdraw. We do not negotiate with inferior species. We conquer or we destroy. He turned to Admiral Kethmal. Begin the attack. I want this system reduced to dust. Kethmal hesitated. The tactical displays showed readings that defied everything he understood about warfare. Your Majesty, perhaps we should study these installations first? If we could understand their technology— I gave you an order, Admiral, Zoran interrupted. Attack, now. Kethmal looked around the bridge at his officers. They were all experienced warriors who had fought in dozens of campaigns. But he could see doubt in their faces. Still, orders were orders. The Empire did not tolerate disobedience. All ships, this is Admiral Kethmal, he announced to the fleet. Begin attack formation. Target the human homeworld. Prepare for full planetary bombardment. The Imperial fleet began to move. 10,000 ships arranged themselves in a battle formation that had never been defeated. Their weapons powered up with energy readings that could crack continents. Their shields activated with technology that had protected them through 1,000 battles. First wave advanced to bombardment range, Kethmal ordered. Cruiser Groups 7 through 12, establish firing positions around the human homeworld. 2,000 Imperial cruisers broke away from the main fleet and accelerated toward Earth. Each ship was the size of a mountain and carried enough firepower to sterilize a planet's surface. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who had never known defeat. Admiral Torres watched the approaching ships from his command center beneath Cheyenne Mountain. Around him, technicians monitored the movements of the Imperial fleet and coordinated with installations throughout the solar system. They're really going to do it, Dr. Vasquez said, standing beside him. Even after seeing what we've built, they're still attacking? Pride? Torres replied. The Empire has never lost a war. They can't conceive of the possibility that they might lose this one. It's going to be their downfall. He activated his communication system. All stations, this is Admiral Torres. The Empire has chosen to attack despite our warning. You are authorized to defend yourselves. Show them what we've built. The response was immediate. Mars spoke first. Chief Engineer Martinez had been waiting for this moment for 15 years. She watched the Imperial cruisers approach on her tactical display, noting their formation and speed. They were heading straight for Earth, ignoring Mars completely. They thought the red planet was no threat. Target the lead squadron, she ordered. Full power to the primary railgun array? Let's show them what happens when they ignore us. The surface of Mars erupted with light. Massive railguns that had been hidden beneath the planet's crust fired in perfect synchronization. The projectiles were tungsten rods accelerated to 30% of light speed by magnetic fields powered by fusion reactors buried deep in the planet's core. The Imperial cruisers had shields that could stop any known weapon. They had armor that could withstand the heat of stars. They had defensive systems that had never been breached in 1,000 years of warfare. None of it mattered. The relativistic projectiles hit the lead cruiser and simply erased it from existence. The ship's shields tried to deflect the incoming fire, but the kinetic energy was too great. The armor tried to absorb the impact, but the projectiles passed through it like it wasn't there. In less than a microsecond, a ship that had taken 50 years to build became a cloud of superheated plasma. The second cruiser suffered the same fate, then the third, then the fourth. In the space of 10 seconds, an entire Imperial squadron simply ceased to exist. "Impossible," Admiral Kethmal whispered, staring at his tactical display. "Our shields are impenetrable. Our armor is the strongest in the galaxy." "Your technology is 1,000 years old," Tora's voice came through the speakers. "We've had 30 years to study it and develop countermeasures. Your shields are designed to stop energy weapons and conventional projectiles. They were never designed to stop relativistic kinetic weapons." The Imperial fleet stopped its advance, stunned by the sudden destruction of an entire squadron. These were ships that had conquered star systems. These were weapons that had destroyed civilizations. And they had been eliminated in seconds by weapons fired from a planet the Empire considered irrelevant. "Continue the attack," Emperor Zoran ordered, his voice carrying a note of desperation. "They got lucky. They cannot have many weapons of that power." But Mars was just the beginning. Jupiter's great red spot pulsed with energy that made the planet's natural radiation look like a candle compared to the sun. The massive fusion reactor hidden within the storm reached full power and began feeding energy to installations throughout the solar system. "Project Thunder is now online," Dr. Vasquez announced from her command center on Ceres. "We have unlimited power for all systems." The asteroid belt began its attack. 2 million asteroids moved in perfect coordination, each one targeting a different Imperial ship. They accelerated to incredible speeds, their small fusion engines pushing them to velocities that made them nearly impossible to intercept. The Imperial fleet tried to defend itself. Point defense weapons fired frantically at the incoming asteroids. Energy shields were reinforced to maximum power. Fighters were launched to intercept the projectiles before they could reach their targets. It didn't work. There were simply too many targets. For every asteroid they destroyed, 10 more got through. And each asteroid that reached its target carried a nuclear warhead powerful enough to destroy a city. The Imperial fleet began to take casualties. Ships that had survived 100 battles were torn apart by weapons they had never encountered. Shields that had protected them from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy failed against human ingenuity. "Sir, we've lost 30% of the third battle group," an officer reported to Admiral Kethmal. "The asteroid weapons are overwhelming our defenses." "Then we go around them," Kethmal replied. "Order the fleet to change course. Approach Earth from the opposite side of the system." But there was no safe approach to Earth. Saturn's rings revealed their true nature as 40 million individual missiles launched simultaneously. They moved like a swarm of deadly insects, each one guided by its own computer and armed with its own warhead. The beautiful rings that had amazed human astronomers for centuries became a weapon of unimaginable destruction. The missiles didn't target the ships directly. Instead, they created a wall of nuclear fire that no fleet could pass through. Any ship that tried to approach Earth would have to fly through a field of atomic explosions that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. "Sir, the Saturn ring system has created an impenetrable barrier," the tactical officer reported. "Any ship that attempts to pass through that field will be destroyed." "Then we'll destroy the rings first," Kethmal ordered. "Concentrate all fire on Saturn. Eliminate those weapons." The Imperial fleet turned its massive firepower towards Saturn. Thousands of energy beams lanced across space, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a mountain. The combined firepower of the fleet could have destroyed a planet. But Saturn was not defenseless. The gas giant's artificial magnetic field generators created a shield that covered the entire planet and its ring system. The Imperial weapons struck the magnetic barrier and were deflected harmlessly into space. "Their planetary shields are deflecting our fire," the weapons officer reported. "We cannot penetrate their defenses." Emperor Zoran felt something he had not experienced in 3 centuries of rule: desperation. His mighty fleet, which had never known defeat, was being systematically destroyed by a species he had considered primitive. "Use the planet crackers," he ordered. "Deploy the Nova bombs. I don't care if we have to destroy this entire star system. These humans will not defeat the Empire." Planet crackers were the Empire's ultimate weapons. They were bombs that could destabilize a planet's core and cause it to explode. Nova bombs could make a star go supernova, destroying everything in the system. These were weapons the Empire used only when they wanted to make an example of a rebellious species. "Your Majesty," Admiral Kethmel said carefully, "if we use those weapons, we will destroy everything in this system, including ourselves." "Better to die fighting than to return to the Empire in defeat," Zoran replied. "Deploy the weapons." Admiral Torres had been monitoring the Imperial communications. He knew about the planet crackers and Nova bombs. Humanity had prepared for this possibility too. "Activate Project Shield," he ordered. Throughout the solar system, massive energy projectors came online. They created a barrier around the entire solar system, a force field powered by the combined energy output of every fusion reactor humanity had built. The barrier was designed to contain the explosion of a supernova and redirect the energy harmlessly into space. But Torres had no intention of letting the Empire use their ultimate weapons. "Activate Project Ghost," he ordered. The Kuiper Belt, the ring of icy objects at the very edge of the solar system, suddenly came alive. What had appeared to be natural debris was actually a fleet of human ships that had been waiting in stealth mode for 30 years. They were invisible to Imperial sensors, hidden among the ice and rock of the outer system. These ships had been built with one purpose: to prevent the Empire from using weapons of mass destruction. They moved silently through space, approaching the Imperial fleet from behind while the aliens were focused on the defenses ahead of them. The ghost ships reached the Imperial fleet and began their work. They didn't attack the main ships. Instead, they targeted the planet crackers and Nova bombs before they could be deployed. Silent explosions lit up space as humanity's stealth fleet eliminated the Empire's ultimate weapons. "Sir, we're under attack from behind," an Imperial officer reported. "Unknown ships are targeting our strategic weapons." "Where did they come from?" Kethmel demanded. "Unknown, sir." "They appeared out of nowhere. Our sensors cannot track them properly." Admiral Torres' voice filled the Imperial bridge once again. "Did you really think we would overlook your planet crackers, Admiral? We've been tracking those weapons since they entered our system. We've been planning to destroy them since before your fleet arrived." The truth was becoming clear to the Imperial fleet. This was not a desperate last stand by a primitive species. This was a carefully planned defense by a civilization that had studied the Empire's tactics for decades. Every Imperial weapon had a counter. Every Imperial strategy had been anticipated. Every move the Empire made was met by a response that had been prepared years in advance. "How is this possible?" Emperor Zoran asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "How could a single species prepare so thoroughly?" "Because we knew you were coming," Torres replied. "We knew from the moment we met your Empire that this day would arrive. We spent 30 years preparing for it. We united our entire species around a single goal. We shared every resource, every breakthrough, every idea. We became something the galaxy has never seen before, a completely unified species with a single purpose." The Imperial fleet continued to take casualties. Ships that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years were being destroyed by weapons they didn't understand, tactics they had never encountered, and a level of preparation they couldn't comprehend. "Sir, we've lost 60% of our fleet," Admiral Kethmel reported. "The humans have countered every attack we've made. Their defenses are holding, and their weapons are more advanced than anything in our databases." Emperor Zoran looked around the bridge at the faces of his officers. For the first time in his long reign, he saw something in their eyes that he had never seen before, the look of soldiers who knew they were beaten. "Request terms for withdrawal," he said quietly. "Your Majesty?" Kethmel asked, not sure he had Heard correctly. You heard me, Admiral. Contact the humans. Ask them what they want for our surrender. The Imperial flagship hung in space like a wounded animal. Half of its hull was blackened from human weapons. Its mighty shields flickered weakly. Around it, the remains of the great Zephyrian fleet floated in broken pieces. Of the 10,000 ships that had entered the solar system, fewer than 3,000 remained capable of flight. Emperor Zoran stood in the ruins of his bridge, his crystal body dim with defeat. For the first time in his 300-year reign, he was about to surrender. The word felt foreign in his mouth, like speaking a language he had never learned. Open communications to the human fleet, he ordered. Admiral Kethmal worked at the damaged communications console. Channel open, Your Majesty. This is Emperor Zoran of the Zephyrian Empire, he began, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. We request terms for cessation of hostilities. Admiral Torres' response came immediately, as if he had been waiting for this moment. This is Admiral Torres. We are prepared to discuss terms. However, you should understand that the situation has changed considerably from your original ultimatum. What do you mean? Zoran asked, though he suspected he already knew. Your empire came here expecting to conquer a primitive species, Torres replied. Instead, you have discovered that humanity possesses technology and capabilities that exceed your own. The balance of power in this galaxy has shifted, Your Imperial Majesty. The question now is not whether humanity will submit to your empire. The question is what role your empire will play in the new galactic order. The words hit Zoran like physical blows. New galactic order. For 1,000 years, the Zephyrian Empire had been the only order in the galaxy. They had been the ultimate authority, the final word on the fate of every species among the stars. What are your terms? He asked quietly. First, your fleet will withdraw immediately from human space, Torres began. You will return to your empire and inform every species under your rule that humanity is strictly off limits. Any Imperial ship that enters our territory without permission will be destroyed without warning. Zoran's body flashed red briefly, then returned to its dim glow. Agreed. What else? Second, you will provide us with complete star charts of your empire. Every system, every trade route, every military installation. We want to know exactly what we're dealing with. That information is classified at the highest levels, Admiral Kethmal protested. Your highest levels just lost a war to a species you considered primitive, Torres replied calmly. Your classification system is no longer relevant. You will provide the information, or we will take it by other means. Emperor Zoran gestured for his admiral to be silent. What other means? We could visit your empire and ask in person, Torres said. I think you would prefer to avoid that scenario. The threat was clear. Humanity had just demonstrated that they could destroy the Empire's most powerful fleet. If they decided to take their weapons to Imperial space, there would be no stopping them. The star charts will be provided, Zoran agreed. What is your third term? Full diplomatic access to every world in your empire, Torres continued. We want to speak directly with every species you have conquered. We want to hear their stories, learn about their cultures, and give them options they have never had before. Options? Zoran asked, though he was beginning to understand what the human meant. Freedom, Torres said simply. The right to choose their own government, their own way of life, their own destiny. Concepts that your empire has never offered. You want to destroy our empire, Zoran realized. We want to transform it, Torres. Corrected. Your empire is built on conquest and oppression. We're offering you the chance to build something better. A confederation of free worlds working together by choice rather than force. And if we refuse? Torres was quiet for a moment before answering. Then you will discover what we have built beyond this solar system. New alarm signals began sounding on the Imperial Bridge. Sensor readings showed impossible energy signatures appearing throughout nearby space. Not just around Earth's solar system, but in dozens of other systems throughout the region. Sir, we're detecting massive installations in the Proxima system. an Imperial officer reported. Also in the Wolf system, the Barnard system, and ... double closed, checking his readings. Sir, they're everywhere. Every uninhabited system within 50 light-years shows signs of human colonization and military installations. Admiral Torres' voice continued calmly. Did you think we only defended our home system? We've been expanding for 60 years, ever since we learned about your empire. Every star system you ignored because it had no intelligent life, every region of space you considered worthless, every corner of the galaxy you never bothered to explore, we've been there. The tactical display updated to show the true scope of human expansion. Automated defense networks, hidden colonies, and sleeper ships had been deployed across hundreds of star systems. The Empire's trade routes, military bases, and communication networks were all within range of human weapons that had been waiting patiently for decades. Your empire controls 400 star systems, Torres continued. But those systems are now surrounded by human installations. Your supply lines pass through space we control. Your military communications travel through networks we monitor. Your fleets operate in regions where we have been preparing defenses for half a century. Emperor Zoran felt his world crumbling. Around him, the Empire had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force. But these humans had superior technology and had surrounded the Empire without anyone noticing. How long have you been planning this? He asked. Since the day we met your first ambassador, Torres replied. We knew from that moment that our species would never be safe as long as your empire existed in its current form. So we began preparing, not just to defend ourselves, but to change the entire galaxy. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice joined the conversation. From her command center on Ceres, your empire has one great weakness, Emperor Zoran. You believe that conquest is the only form of expansion. You cannot imagine a species that grows not by destroying others, but by creating something new. While you were building fleets to conquer more worlds, Admiral Torres added, we were building something else, a network of free societies connected by choice rather than force, a galactic community based on cooperation rather than domination. You're talking about revolution, Zoran said. We're talking about evolution, Torres corrected. The galaxy is changing, Your Imperial Majesty. The age of empires built on conquest is ending. The age of cooperation is beginning. You can be part of that future, or you can be left behind. Buy it? The Emperor looked around his damaged bridge at the faces of his officers. These were beings who had devoted their lives to the Empire, who had believed in its mission of bringing order to the galaxy through force. But now they were looking at him with questions in their eyes. What exactly are you proposing? Zoran asked. A new system, Torres replied. Your empire becomes a confederation of free worlds. Each species chooses its own government and way of life. Trade is conducted through mutual agreement rather than forced tribute. Disputes are resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. And humanity's role in this new system? We will be guardians, Dr. Vasquez answered. We will protect the free worlds from those who would conquer them. We will share our technology with those who choose cooperation over conquest. We will ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between slavery and extinction. You're asking us to give up everything we've built, Admiral Kethmal protested. You're asking us to build something better, Torres corrected. Your empire conquered worlds through fear. Imagine what you could accomplish if those worlds joined you through hope. Emperor Zoran was silent for a long time. Around him, the bridge crew waited for his decision. In the space beyond, the human weapons remained trained on his fleet, ready to resume their deadly work if necessary. The species we have conquered, he said finally, many of them hate us. If they are given freedom, they will want revenge. Some will, Torres agreed. But we believe that most will choose to build rather than destroy if given the chance. And for those who do seek revenge, we will stand between them and you. Protection works both ways in a confederation. You would protect us from our former subjects. We would protect everyone from those who choose violence over peace, Dr. Vasquez replied. That's what guardians do. The Emperor's crystal body began to change color, cycling through hues that indicated deep thought. His officers watched him carefully, knowing that his next words would determine the fate of their civilization. "If we agree to your terms," Zoran said slowly, "what guarantee do we have that humanity will honor this agreement? What stops you from simply conquering us once we have dismantled our military?" "Because conquest was never our goal," Torres replied. "We could have destroyed your fleet completely today. We could have pursued your survivors back to Imperial space and conquered your empire by force, but we chose not to. We offered you terms instead of destruction because we believe in the future we're trying to build. A future where former enemies become allies," Dr. Vasquez added. "Where the Zephyrian Empire's knowledge and experience help guide a new galactic civilization. Where your people contribute to something greater than what either of our species could build alone." The Emperor looked at his tactical display, where human weapons continued to track his ships with perfect precision. He looked at the star charts showing human installations throughout the galaxy. He looked at the ruins of his fleet and the faces of his defeated officers. "We accept your terms," he said finally. "The Zephyrian Empire will become part of your Confederation of Free Worlds." "The Galactic Confederation of Free Worlds?" Torres corrected. "This isn't humanity's confederation, Your Imperial Majesty. This belongs to everyone who chooses to join it." "When do we begin this transformation?" Zoran asked. "It has already begun," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Our diplomatic ships are already en route to Imperial space. They carry messages of hope to every world in your empire. They offer technology, assistance, and most importantly, choice. Some worlds will choose independence," Torres added. "Some will choose to remain part of a reformed empire. Some will choose to join other confederations or form new alliances. All of those choices will be respected and protected." Admiral Kethmal worked at his console, downloading the star charts and diplomatic protocols that the humans were transmitting. "Your Imperial Majesty, they're providing us with communication codes for every species in our empire. They want to establish direct contact immediately. They also want to share medical technology," another officer reported. "Disease treatments, life extension, genetic therapies. They're offering to heal our worlds as well as free them." Emperor Zoran felt something he had not experienced in centuries: hope. Not the cold satisfaction of conquest, but genuine hope for a better future. "Admiral Torres," he said, "I have one final question. Why are you doing this? Why not simply conquer us and rule the galaxy as we did?" Torres was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because we learned something from watching your empire, Your Imperial Majesty. We learned that ruling through fear creates enemies, not allies. We learned that conquest builds empires, but cooperation builds civilizations. We learned that the greatest victories are not won through warfare, but through showing others a better way to live. And because," Dr. Vasquez added, "we believe that every species in this galaxy has something valuable to contribute. Your empire's knowledge, the conquered world's cultures, humanity's technology, together we can build something greater than the sum of our parts." The Imperial fleet began its long journey home, carrying news that would transform the galaxy. The age of the Zephyrian Empire was ending, but the age of the Galactic Confederation was beginning. And at the center of it all was a small blue world whose people had looked up at the stars and decided that the universe could be better than it was. In the years that followed, the transformation would not be easy. There would be resistance from those who profited from the old system. There would be conflicts between species that had ancient grievances. There would be challenges that no one could foresee. But for the first time in galactic history, there was also hope. Hope that freedom was possible. Hope that cooperation could triumph over conquest. Hope that the stars themselves could be made brighter by the light of free civilizations working together. The war was over before it began, but the peace that followed would last for generations. The message came through the Deep Space Relay at 0347 Galactic Standard Time. It was weak and broken, filled with static and fear, The beings on the other end were crying. This is Kepler 442b colony calling anyone who can hear us. We need help. They came from the dark. They eat everything. Our weapons do nothing. Please, if anyone is listening, we have children here. We have families. Please help us. The transmission cut to static. Then it repeated over and over, the same desperate voice. The same plea for help. On Altair Prime, the Galactic Council received the message 3 hours later. The tall, silver-skinned Altarians moved with their usual grace through the crystal halls of the council chamber. They did not hurry. They never hurried. It was not civilized. Council leader Zethka studied the message with calm eyes. The Altarians had evolved past the need for violence thousands of years ago. They solved problems with thought and discussion. They believed all intelligent life could do the same. The Zilani colony is under attack, Zethka announced to the council. They claim to be facing an aggressive species. The other council members shifted in their seats. There were representatives from 47 different worlds. Each one had achieved peace long ago. War was something primitive species did. What? Do we know of this attacking force? Asked Velhim of the crystalline hegemony. Her body was made of living crystal that sang when she spoke. Very little, Zethka replied. Our long-range sensors show a large fleet near Kepler 442b. The ships are biological in nature. They appear to be consuming the planet's resources. Consuming? The word came from Nexus 7, the artificial intelligence that spoke for the machine. Worlds, clarify this term. They are eating the forest, the crops, the cities, everything organic. A wave of discomfort passed through the council. These beings had not seen real warfare in centuries. The idea of a species that consumed other worlds was almost beyond their understanding. We must send a diplomatic team, said Elder San of the Verdani Tree people. All conflicts can be resolved through proper communication. Yes, agreed Zethka. We will send our best negotiators. This misunderstanding can surely be resolved. But as they talked and planned and debated, more messages came from Kepler 442b. Each one was more desperate than the last. Day 2, they took the northern cities. Millions are gone. Not dead, gone, consumed. The children, oh stars, the children ... die. Day 5. We are in the deep shelters now. They are above us. We can hear them digging. They never stop digging. Day 7. Half of us are left. Maybe less. They learn from everything they eat. They know our language now. They mock us with the voices of our dead. The council met again. And again they formed committees. They studied the problem. They wrote reports. This was how civilized beings handled crises. Meanwhile, on a small blue planet in a quiet arm of the galaxy, humans were listening to. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community. Most species saw them as primitive. Humans still fought wars. They still carried weapons. They had not evolved past violence like proper civilized beings. Admiral Sarah Chun sat in the command center of Luna Base, Earth's primary military installation. She was a small woman with short black hair and scars on her hands from a dozen battles. The humans had fought among themselves for thousands of years before discovering they were not alone in the universe. Admiral, said Lieutenant Torres, we're receiving that transmission from Kepler 442b again. Sarah had been listening to the Zilani pleas for help for 3 days now. She had also been monitoring the Galactic Council's response. Or lack of response. What's the Council's latest position? She asked. They're forming a subcommittee to study the cultural implications of intervention, ma'am. Sarah's jaw tightened. She had seen this before. When humans faced a threat, they acted. When the galactic community faced a threat, they talked. Time to Kepler 442 be at maximum burn? She asked. 18 days, Admiral. And the Council's diplomatic mission? They're still selecting the team. Estimated departure in 6 weeks. Sarah stood and walked to the viewing port. Earth hung below them, blue and green and alive. It was a world that had known war, a world that had learned to fight. The galactic community thought this made humans primitive. Sarah thought it made them ready. Get me a connection to the UN Security Council, she ordered. 2 hours later, Sarah stood before the leaders of Earth's nations. The chamber was deep underground, built to survive nuclear war. Humans knew about survival. Members of the Security Council, Sarah began. The Zilani colony is dying while the galaxy debates. We have the capability to help them. Admiral Chun, said Secretary General Williams, we are still new to galactic politics. Perhaps we should follow established protocols. Ma'am, with respect, the established protocol is to let them die? The room fell silent. On the main screen, the latest message from Kepler 442b played. The voice was barely human now, broken, desperate. Day 12. We are the last shelter, 300 of us. They know we are here. They are playing games with us, using the voices of our families to call to us, begging us to come out, to join them. We will not, we cannot. If anyone is listening, please remember us. Remember that we tried to be good, that we tried to live in peace. Sarah let the message finish. Then she spoke again. The Zilani never hurt anyone. They grew food for half the sector. They made art, they wrote poetry. They had children who laughed and played. And now they're going to die because the galaxy thinks violence is uncivilized. What are you proposing, Admiral? Asked the Russian representative. We go, we fight, we save who we can. The other species will object, said the Chinese delegate. They see us as warlike already. Let them object, Sarah replied. The Zilani are not asking for a committee or a study or a diplomatic solution. They're asking for warriors, and warriors are what we have. The debate that followed was quick by galactic standards but long by human ones. 2 hours of argument. 2 hours while people died on a distant world. Finally, Secretary General Williams called for a vote. All in favor of authorizing military intervention to assist the Zilani colony? The vote was unanimous. Sarah returned to Luna Base with her orders. She found her staff already preparing. They had been listening to the Zilani messages too. They had heard the children crying. They had heard the desperation. Ma'am, said Captain Torres, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force is ready for deployment. The 82nd Airborne is loading transports. Special Operations Command is requesting permission to join the mission. Sarah nodded. These were her people. Warriors who had trained their entire lives for war but had only known peace. They were eager, perhaps too eager. Remember, she told them, we're not going to conquer, we're going to save. Yes, ma'am, Torres replied. But to save them, we'll have to kill whatever's trying to eat them. Yes, Sarah said quietly, we will. The human fleet launched 6 hours later. 12 ships carrying 5,000 of Earth's finest warriors. They did not ask permission from the Galactic Council. They did not wait for diplomatic clearance. They simply went. As they entered hyperspace, another message came from Kepler 442b. This one was different, clearer. It was not a Zilani voice. To any who listen, this world is ours now. We are the Vortex swarm, we consume, we grow, we spread. Soon we will. Come for your worlds too. Your soft civilizations will feed us well. The message ended with sounds that might have been laughter or screaming, or both. In the command center of the battleship Endurance, Admiral Sarah Chun studied the tactical displays. The other galactic species had evolved beyond violence. They had achieved perfect peace, perfect civilization, perfect helplessness. Admiral, said the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're ordering us to return to Earth immediately. Reply that we're experiencing communication difficulties, Sarah ordered. All attempts to reach us are failing due to technical problems. Ma'am, they'll know we're lying. Sarah smiled grimly. Yes, they will. But by the time they figure out how to do something about it, we'll already be there. The human fleet continued toward Kepler 442b. Behind them, the Galactic Council was in emergency session. Emergency committees were being formed. Emergency subcommittees were being established to support the emergency committees. Ahead of them, the Zilani were dying. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the Vortex swarm was spreading, growing, learning, The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you asked Earth for help. What happened when you sent warriors to do a warrior's job? What happened when civilization met its opposite? The humans were coming. And after they arrived, nothing would ever be the same. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace 18 days after leaving Earth. What they found at Kepler 442b made even the hardest soldiers curse. The planet was dying. Where once green continents had stretched across 3/4 of the world, now only bare rock remained. The oceans were turning black. Strange growths covered the surface like cancer. "Jesus Christ," whispered Captain Marcus Torres as he stared at the tactical display. "What did they do to it?" Admiral Chun stood beside him on the bridge of the Endurance. She had seen war. She had seen cities burn and nations fall, but this was different. This was not conquest. This was consumption. "Sensor report," she ordered. "Ma'am, I'm reading massive biological activity on the surface. The structures appear to be eating the planet, literally converting matter into more of themselves. Any sign of the Zalami?" "Weak life signs in the deep cave systems. Maybe a few hundred survivors. They're scattered across the northern continent." Chun nodded grimly. "From millions to hundreds in less than 3 weeks. The Galactic Council was still forming committees. What about the swarm fleet?" "Orbiting the planet, ma'am. 67 vessels. The single quotes read ... Dodge. Strange. The ships appear to be grown rather than built. Organic hulls. No obvious weapons systems." "They don't need weapons," Torres said quietly. "They are weapons." Chun activated the fleet communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Chun. You can see what we're facing. The enemy has consumed an entire world and nearly wiped out its population. The galactic community expects us to fail here. They expect us to run home and let the diplomats handle this." She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. Young faces, eager faces, faces that had never seen real war. "They're wrong. We are the United Earth Defense Force. We are Marines. We are soldiers, we are warriors, and we did not come here to fail." The response was immediate. Across the fleet, crews cheered. On the assault ships, Marines loaded their weapons. In the fighter bays, pilots ran final checks on their craft. The galactic community had evolved beyond violence. Humanity had perfected it. All ships, battle stations, prepare for orbital assault. The Vorthic swarm detected the human approach within minutes. Their ships moved with unnatural grace, organic hulls rippling as they turned to face the newcomers. They had consumed dozens of peaceful civilizations. They had learned to expect surrender. Instead, the humans opened fire. The first salvo came from the heavy cruiser Manhattan. 12 fusion warheads struck the nearest swarm vessel. The organic hull bubbled and burned, then began to regenerate. Within seconds, the damage was healing. "Adaptive armor," reported the weapons officer. "They're learning from our attacks." "Then we learn faster," Chun replied. All ships switched to kinetic rounds, high-velocity penetrators. The human fleet had come prepared for war. Not the civilized warfare the galaxy knew, where opponents agreed on rules and limits. Real war. Ugly war. War where the only rule was winning. Tungsten rods, moving at significant fractions of light speed, tore through the swarm ships. The organic armor tried to adapt, but physics was physics. Enough force applied to any material would destroy it. 3 swarm vessels died in the first exchange. The others began to change, their hulls shifting and morphing. They were learning, adapting, but they needed time. The humans did not give them time. "Launch all fighters. Begin atmospheric entry procedures. I want Marines on the ground in 30 minutes." Captain Torres stood in the drop bay of the assault ship Yorktown. Around him, 500 Marines checked their equipment one final time. They were the best Earth had to offer. Special forces, rangers, warriors who had trained for years for a war that had never come until now. "Listen up," Torres called out. "The enemy down there is not like anything we've trained for. They adapt, they learn. They use everything they consume to become stronger. But they have one weakness. He activated his armor's display, showing feeds from the orbital sensors. The swarm creatures moved across the planet's surface in vast hordes. They were individually weak but collectively overwhelming. They're bugs, Torres continued. Smart bugs, but still bugs. And what do we do with bugs? We step on them, sir. The Marines shouted back. Torres smiled grimly. Exactly. Remember your training. Stay mobile. Watch your six. And if something tries to eat you, shoot it in the face until it stops. The drop ships launched into Kepler 442b's atmosphere. Behind them, the space battle continued. The swarm had adapted to kinetic weapons and was starting to fight back. But they fought like they always had. Like they expected their enemies to fight, the humans did not fight fair. While the swarm ships focused on the main fleet, cloaked destroyers moved into position. Stealth technology the galaxy considered primitive but effective. The destroyers launched their payloads directly into the swarm formation, nuclear mines, hundreds of them. Each one carrying a 50-megaton warhead. The explosions lit up the system. Half the remaining swarm fleet died in the first detonation. The others found themselves scattered and damaged, their organic systems struggling to cope with radiation poisoning. On the surface, the first human Marines were landing. Torres led Alpha Company down into what had been New Geneva, the Zelani colony's capital. The city was gone. In its place stood towers of living flesh that pulsed with alien life. The streets were covered in organic matter that moved and shifted like living carpet. Movement, called Sergeant Rodriguez. 200 meters coming. Fast, the swarm creatures came in a wave. They had been the size of insects when they first arrived on Kepler 442b, but they had consumed much since then. Now they were the size of vehicles, with mandibles that could cut through steel and acid that could melt bone. They expected the humans to run, or hide, or try to negotiate. Instead, the humans ran toward them. Contact front? Torres shouted. Light them up. The Marines opened fire with weapons the galaxy considered barbaric. Projectile weapons that relied on chemical explosives to propel metal at high velocity. Primitive technology that most species had abandoned thousands of years ago. The swarm creatures had adapted to energy weapons, to plasma bolts and particle beams and all the civilized weapons of the galaxy. They had never faced humans with assault rifles. The first wave died in seconds, but more were coming. Always more. Grenades, Rodriguez called out. Frag out? Chemical explosives detonated among the swarm ranks. Creatures that had adapted to survive the sophisticated weapons of a dozen civilizations were torn apart by simple metal fragments moving at high speed. But they were learning. The second wave came differently. They moved in patterns designed to minimize casualties from explosive weapons. They had adapted, so the humans adapted too. Switch to incendiary, Torres ordered. Burn them out. Flamethrowers lit up the organic street. The swarm creatures screamed and writhed as fire consumed them. They tried to adapt, to develop resistance to heat. But adaptation took time, and the humans did not stop burning them. The battle for New Geneva lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the city was ash and bone, but it was human ash and human bone. The Marines had taken it back. Sir, called Private Chun, I'm reading life signs in the subway tunnels. Zelani survivors. Torres led a squad down into the darkness. They found them in the deepest tunnels. 237 Zelani civilians, men, women, children. They were thin and terrified and nearly dead from starvation. They were alive. The Zelani looked at the humans with wonder. These strange, violent beings from a primitive world. They had done what the entire Galactic Council could not do. They had fought the swarm and won. You came, whispered Elder Meishan, the oldest survivor. The Council said you were too primitive to help. They said violence was not the answer. Torres looked around at the Marines. Young men and women covered in alien blood and human sweat. They had come 18 days across the galaxy to save people they had never met. They had fought creatures from nightmares to pull survivors from the dark. Maybe violence isn't the answer, he said quietly. But sometimes it's the only question that matters. The evacuation took 12 more hours. The Marines worked without rest, pulling survivors from hiding places across the continent. Every cave, every bunker, every desperate hole where Zilani had hidden from the swarm. In orbit, Admiral Chun watched the reports come in. 237 Zilani saved. 500 more found in other locations. Nearly 1,000 survivors pulled from the wreckage of their world. The cost had been high. 37 Marines killed in action, 216 wounded. 3 ships damaged. The assault carrier Saratoga was a total loss, rammed by a dying swarm vessel that had chosen suicide over surrender. But they had won. "Admiral," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council." "Let me guess," Chun replied. "They're upset." "Yes, ma'am. They're demanding we withdraw immediately and turn the survivors over to proper authorities for processing." Chun looked at the tactical display. The swarm fleet was destroyed, the surface was secured, the survivors were safe, and the galaxy was angry that someone had actually solved the problem. "Reply that we're still experiencing communication difficulties," she ordered. "Ma'am, they're also asking about our casualties. They want to know how many humans died." Chun was quiet for a moment. 37 dead. 37 young people who would never see Earth again, who had died saving strangers on a world they had never seen. "Tell them," she said finally, "that Earth's warriors paid the price gladly. And if they have a problem with that, they can file a complaint." But as the human fleet prepared to leave Kepler 442b, new intelligence was coming in. The swarm ship that had rammed the Saratoga had transmitted something before it died, a signal into deep space. The Zilani survivors had information too. Fragments of conversations they had overheard, glimpses of swarm communications. This had not been an invasion. It had been a scouting mission. The real swarm was still out there. Billions of ships. Trillions of creatures. All of them now aware that something new had entered their galaxy. Something that fought back. Something that won. The galaxy thought the humans were primitives. The swarm was about to learn they were wrong. But the galaxy was also about to learn something else. Something that would change everything. The humans had not just saved the Zilani. They had taught them how to fight, and now word was spreading. To every world, every species, every civilization that had forgotten what it meant to be a warrior. Earth had sent its warriors, the galaxy had seen what they could do. Now the question was, what would the galaxy do with that knowledge? The news of humanity's victory at Kepler 442 be spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every civilized world knew what had happened. The primitive humans had done what the entire Galactic Council could not. They had faced the swarm. And the reaction was not what Admiral Chun had expected on Altair Prime. Council leader Zethka called an emergency session. The great crystal chamber filled with representatives from 47 worlds. Their faces showed not gratitude, but concern. "The humans have acted without authorization," Zethka announced. "They have violated 17 different protocols regarding intervention in galactic affairs." "They saved lives," protested Ambassador Kylon of the Verdani. "Nearly 1,000 Zilani survivors were rescued. At what cost?" demanded Velhim. Of the crystalline hegemony, her crystal body sang with anger. "We have received reports of their methods, nuclear weapons, chemical explosives, deliberate destruction of an entire city." "The city was already lost," Kylon replied. "The swarm had consumed it. That is not the point," Zethka said coldly. "The humans chose violence as their first option, not negotiation, not peaceful contact. They arrived at Kepler 442b and immediately began killing. Around the chamber, heads nodded in agreement. The galactic community had built its civilization on the principle that violence was never the answer, that all conflicts could be resolved through discussion and compromise. The humans had proven them wrong, and they hated it. "We propose immediate sanctions against Earth," announced Nexus 7, the artificial intelligence that spoke for the machine worlds. "They must be made to understand that such behavior is unacceptable." "Agreed," said Velhim. "We should limit their access to galactic trade routes, restrict their technology imports, make them understand the consequences of their primitive actions. But not everyone agreed. In the back of the chamber, Elder Thane of the Outer Rim world stood slowly. He was old, even by galactic standards. Old enough to remember when his people had still known how to fight. Council leader, Thane said quietly, I have a question. If the humans had not acted, how many Zelani would be alive today? The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to answer that question. Our diplomatic mission would have arrived in 4 more weeks, Zethka replied. We would have negotiated a peaceful solution. With what? Thane asked. The swarm had already consumed the planet. There would have been nothing left to negotiate. You cannot know that, Velham protested. Can I not? Thane's voice carried the weight of centuries. Tell me, Counselor, when was the last time any of our worlds faced real danger? When did any of us last fight for our lives? The silence stretched longer. We have achieved perfect peace, Zethka said finally. We have evolved beyond the need for violence. Have we? Thane asked. Or have we simply been lucky? Lucky that nothing like the swarm has threatened us before? Meanwhile, on Earth, the returning fleet was being welcomed as heroes. The crowds in Luna City filled the streets. Children waved flags and threw flowers. The survivors they had rescued stood with them. Living proof that sometimes violence was the only answer. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in her laboratory deep beneath the Capitol, studying samples the Marines had brought back from Kepler 442b. What she was finding made her blood run cold. The swarm was not just a collection of hungry insects. It was something far worse. Admiral Chun, she said into her communicator, I need to speak with you immediately. Chun arrived an hour later, still wearing her dress uniform from the welcome ceremony. She looked tired. The celebration had been wonderful, but she knew it was premature. What did you find, Doctor? Chun asked. Elena pulled up a holographic display showing cellular structures. They were unlike anything in the galactic databases. The swarm creatures we fought at Kepler 442b were not the original form of this species. What? Do you mean? I mean they started as something else, something smaller. But every time they consume another species, they incorporate that species' genetic material into themselves. They become stronger, smarter, more dangerous. Elena switched to another display. This one showed DNA sequences. Look at this, Zelani genetic markers, but also markers from 17 other species that should not exist on Kepler 442b. Shun stared at the data. How many other worlds have they hit? Based on this genetic analysis, at least 20. Probably more. Each time they consume a civilization, they learn from it. They take its knowledge, its strengths, its technologies, and they adapt to its weaknesses? Exactly. Admiral, the swarm we fought was specifically evolved to counter the defensive strategies of the galactic community, energy shields. Plasma weapons, long-range bombardment, they had adapted to overcome all of it. Chun felt a chill run down her spine, but not human tactics. No, because no one in the galaxy fights like humans do. No one else uses chemical explosives and projectile weapons. No one else charges straight into close combat. The swarm had never encountered anything like our Marines. Elena pulled up another display. This one showed intelligence estimates. Admiral, what we fought at Kepler 442b was just a scouting force, a probe to test the galaxy's defenses. How do you know? Because of what the survivors told us. The swarm. Creatures were communicating during the battle, sending data back to something larger, something much larger. Shun studied the reports. The implications were staggering. How much larger? Based on the signal analysis, the main swarm fleet could have millions of ships, maybe billions. Jesus Christ. Admiral, there's something else. Something worse. Elena's voice was shaking now. The galactic community's peaceful nature isn't an accident. It's not evolution, it's selection. What do you mean? I mean the swarm has been doing this for a very long time. Thousands of years. Maybe longer. Every time a warrior civilization rises in this galaxy, the swarm finds it, consumes it, eliminates it. Elena pulled up a star chart showing the galaxy. Red dots marked dead systems. There were hundreds of them. The only civilizations that survive are the ones that choose peace over war, that abandon violence completely, that become so civilized they can't fight back when something like the swarm comes for them. Chun stared at the chart. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. An entire galaxy had been shaped by predation, molded into perfect prey. The galactic community exists because everything that could fight back is already dead, she said quietly. Yes, and now the swarm knows about us. Knows that somewhere in this galaxy, a warrior civilization still exists? Chun activated her communicator. Get me the UN Security Council emergency session, and contact our embassy on Altair Prime. I need to know what the Galactic Council is planning. The report from the embassy was not encouraging. Ambassador Wright's message was brief and grim. Admiral, the Council is voting on sanctions against Earth. They want to punish us for our actions at Kepler 442b. They're calling us a dangerous influence, a threat to galactic peace. Chun shook her head in disbelief. The galaxy was facing an existential threat, and they were angry at the only people who had shown they could fight it, but worse news was coming: deep space monitoring stations across the galaxy were detecting something massive moving in the void between stars. Something that had been hidden in the darkness for centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike. The main swarm fleet was moving, billions of ships heading for the galactic core. They had learned about humanity's intervention at Kepler 442b. They had analyzed the human tactics. They were adapting, and they were coming to finish what they had started on dozens of peaceful worlds. Civilizations that had known only peace for thousands of years were about to discover what their ancestors had forgotten. What it meant to fight for survival. What it meant to face an enemy that showed no mercy. The galaxy had chosen peace, had evolved beyond violence, had created the most advanced, most civilized society in the history of the universe, and now it was going to die because of it, unless something changed. Unless the galaxy could remember what humanity had never forgotten: how to fight, how to kill, how to win. In the crystal chambers of Altair Prime, the Galactic Council continued their debates. They formed new committees. They wrote new protocols. They did what civilized beings always did when faced with a crisis. They talked on Earth. Admiral Chun stood before the UN Security Council and spoke truths that no one wanted to hear. The galaxy is going to fall, she said simply. The swarm is coming, and they can't stop it, won't stop it, because stopping it would require them to become something they're not. What are you suggesting, Admiral? Asked Secretary General Williams. I'm suggesting we have a choice. We can let the galaxy burn and protect ourselves, or we can try to save them. How? Xian looked around the room at the leaders of humanity. Warriors who had learned to love peace but had never forgotten how to wage war. We teach them, she said. We teach them what we never forgot. What their ancestors knew before the swarm killed them all. And what's that? How to fight back? The vote was close. Closer than anyone had expected. Half the Security Council wanted to withdraw from galactic affairs entirely, to let the civilized species face the consequences of their choices, but in the end, humanity chose to help. Because that was what humans did. They helped, even when it was dangerous. Even when it was stupid. Even when the people they were helping hated them for it. The message went out to every human ship, every human base, every human settlement across the galaxy. Earth was going to war. Not for conquest, not for glory, but to save a galaxy that had forgotten how to save itself. The swarm was coming. The galaxy was defenseless, and somewhere between those two facts lay humanity's choice. They chose to fight. But as Admiral Chun prepared her fleets and Dr. Vasquez studied her samples and the politicians made their speeches, a darker truth was becoming clear. The galaxy had forgotten how to fight. But they remembered how to fear. And when the peaceful civilizations of the galaxy finally understood what was coming for them, some would remember their warrior heritage. They would rediscover the violence their ancestors had known. The galaxy would burn. But this time it would burn with the fires of war, not consumption. And in the end, perhaps that was the only way it could survive. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. Representatives from every civilized world sat in the crystal chamber on Altair Prime, but fear had replaced their usual calm dignity. The holographic display at the center of the room showed the approaching threat. A dark cloud moving through space, billions of ships, the main Vorthax swarm fleet. Estimated time of arrival at the galactic core? Asked Council Leader Zethka. His silver skin had lost its usual glow. 14 days, replied Nexus 7, the machine. Intelligence, the outer colonies will fall first. Then the trade worlds. Then us. Silence filled the chamber. These beings had lived in peace for so long they had forgotten what real fear felt like. Now it consumed them. Our fleets? Asked Velhim of the crystalline hegemony. Will not be enough? Nexus 7 responded with mechanical honesty. Our ships are designed for exploration and commerce. The swarm has consumed 17 warrior civilizations. They have adapted our peaceful technologies into weapons of war. Elder Thane of the Outer Rim stood slowly. There is one option we have not discussed. The humans, Zethka said with distaste. They proved at Kepler 442b that they can fight the swarm, that they can win. Their methods are barbaric, protested Velhim. They destroyed an entire city. They used nuclear weapons. Chemical explosives? They are everything we have evolved beyond. And yet they are alive, Thane replied. And the Zilani they saved are alive. While we debate ethics, billions of our people are about to die. The argument that followed was heated. For hours, the council debated whether to ask for human help. Some called it madness. Others called it surrender to primitive thinking, but as reports came in from the outer colonies, the debate shifted. The swarm had reached the edge of civilized space. The agricultural world of Kepler 186f had gone silent. So had the mining stations of Volf 359. The pattern was always the same. Arrival, consumption, silence. Finally, Zethka called for a vote. All in favor of requesting military assistance from Earth? The vote was close, very close. But fear won over pride. 20 minutes later, Ambassador James Wright received the most important message of his diplomatic career. The Galactic Council was formally requesting Earth's help in defending against the Vortex swarm, but they had conditions, many conditions. They want us to fight their war, Wright reported to Admiral Chun over secure communication, but they want to control how we fight it. What kind of control? Chun asked. No nuclear weapons. No chemical weapons, no destruction of civilian infrastructure, no targeting of non-combatants. They want us to follow their rules of warfare. Chun was quiet for a long moment. Do they understand what we're facing? I tried to explain, Admiral. They don't want to hear it. They think there has to be a civilized way to fight the swarm. There is no civilized way to fight extinction, Chun replied. Tell them our terms, full operational command. No interference, access to all galactic resources and technology. And complete freedom in tactical decisions. Admiral, they'll never agree to that. Then they can face the swarm alone. The negotiation took 3 days. 3 days while the swarm consumed more worlds. 3 days while billions died. But in the end, the galaxy's survival instinct overcame their pride. Earth would lead the defense. Humanity would command the largest fleet in galactic history. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the peaceful civilizations would learn what it meant to prepare for war. General Patricia Reeves arrived at Altair Prime aboard the dreadnought Washington. She was a small woman with gray hair and scars on her face from a dozen conflicts on Earth. She had never expected to command an alien fleet. The briefing room was packed with military officers from across the galaxy. They were scientists, engineers, explorers. They had never been soldiers. Ladies, gentlemen, and artificial intelligences, Reeves began, in 10 days, the largest hostile force in galactic history will arrive at our doorstep. They will try to Eat us, all of us. Every man, woman, child, and machine in civilized space. She activated the holographic display, showing the swarm's approach vector. The enemy adapts to whatever it faces, it learns, it evolves. It has consumed warrior civilizations far more advanced than any of us, but it has never faced us before. Never faced humans working with the resources of an entire galaxy. Admiral? Kethvar of the Seraphim Navy raised a graceful hand. General, our fleets are not designed for combat. Our crews have no experience with violence. Then we'll teach them, Reeves replied, starting now. What followed was the most intensive military training program in galactic history. Human drill sergeants worked around the clock to turn scientists into soldiers. Engineers learned to build weapons instead of wonders. Diplomatic corps officers learned to coordinate battle fleets instead of peace talks. It was ugly. Brutal, many of the alien crews broke under the pressure. The elegant Seraphim wept when forced to practice targeting civilian structures. The logical Nexus Prime struggled with the chaos of human battle tactics, but they learned, Captain. Torres found himself on the bridge of the Altarian battleship Harmony, trying to explain human warfare to its crystal-skinned crew. Your enemy wants to eat you, he told them, not defeat you. Not conquer you, eat you. There are no rules in this fight except survival. But surely there must be limits, protested Commander Limshao. Some actions that remain unthinkable even in war. Torres pulled up footage from Kepler 442b, the ruined cities. The organic towers feeding on the planet's corpse. The scattered bones of children. This is what happens when you fight fair against an enemy that doesn't, he said quietly. The swarm doesn't care about your ethics. It doesn't respect your civilization. It just wants to eat you and